Hello, welcome to True Crime Talk. This is Kathleen, and today I'm going to be talking about the missing persons case of Conor and Sheila Dwyer, who went missing in 1991 from the town of Fermoy in County Cork, Ireland. This is a really old missing persons case from Ireland. They've been missing for over 30 years. I think it's like 34 to 35 years since 1991. And recently, like in 2024, 2025, the police have put out an appeal to the public to try to get some possible, maybe new information about this case. I'm going to read an article from, it's called Echo Live. It's a website. It says the Garda investigating the disappearance of Cork couple Conor and Sheila Dwyer have issued a fresh appeal for information with their latest line of inquiry, focused on Cobb. Their disappearance remains one of the most enduring and baffling missing persons mysteries in the history of the state. It has been 34 years since Mr. and Mrs. Dwyer were last seen alive in Fermoy on April 30th, 1991. The couple were last seen at approximately 9:30 a.m. while they were exiting St. Patrick's Church following a requiem mass close to their Chapel Hill home. The following day, Sheila spoke with her sister by phone, which is the last known time that someone heard from her. On Sheila's birthday, May 19th, her sister tried calling her again but never received a response. A couple of days later, both of Sheila's sisters went to visit the couple's home in Fermoy but found it empty. They then reported the couple missing to Gardaí on May 22nd. When Gardaí attended at the couple's home, they found both their passports along with approximately £1,000 in cash. While it was noted that nothing in the home appeared to be disturbed, there were some clothes that were missing along with the couple's car, a white Toyota Cressida registered 5797ZT. The succinct report on the front of the Evening Echo on Thursday, May 23, 1991, entitled Missing Couple Baffle Gardaí, captures this story in details which, 34 years later, remain largely unchanged. The report says they are described by Gardaí and friends as a very close, reserved couple who kept to themselves, adding that Gardaí had checked the ports to no avail and there were heightened fears for their safety. Despite all ports being notified of the vehicle at the time of the couple's vanishing, there were never any reports of the car having left the country or ever being re-registered in another name. In the years since their disappearance, there have been many rumors and multiple reports of sightings. One such sighting was reported from Germany in 1993, but nothing came of it. That same year, RTE's Crime Line staged a reconstruction of the couple's last known movements, and the program received more than 100 calls from the public, but any hoped-for breakthrough failed to materialize. This remains an open and active investigation, and there has been numerous reviews throughout the years. A spokesperson for Gardaí said that over the past 3 decades, several lines of inquiry have been followed up on, both domestically and abroad, leading to the case being fully reviewed at this time. In addition, the River Blackwater has been searched on numerous occasions by the Garda Water Unit, but to no avail. Conor Dwyer, who was 62 years of age at the time, is described as being 5'8" in height, of stocky build with a tanned complexion and a receding hairline. He also wore thick-rimmed brown glasses. Sheila Dwyer, who had just turned 60 years of age, is described as being 5'8" in height, of a slim build, with a fair complexion and long blonde hair. If they are still alive today, Mr. and Mrs. Dwyer would now be 95 and 94 respectively. We are appealing for closure for Conor and Sheila's family, especially their 2 sons, and are seeking the public's assistance with the missing persons investigation, said a Gardaí spokesperson. The location of the white Toyota Cressida is deemed vital in this investigation and we believe could hold the key to solving Conor and Sheila's disappearance. Gardaí have also shared a number of questions relating to this case, one of which being if the couple were known to visit the Cove area or any other areas regularly. Even the smallest piece of information could prove helpful and will be welcomed by investigating Gardaí. Anyone with information is asked to contact Investigating Guardy at Fermoy Garda Station on 025-82100. And this article is from May 5th, 2025, so just this month. So they're still trying to locate these people after all these years. They haven't given up on them. I'm going to read some background information from Wikipedia. So if Wikipedia is accurate, then this information will be accurate. If it's not, then it won't be. But it says, by 1991, Conor and Sheila Dwyer resided at their home in Chapel Hill, Fermoy. By the time of their disappearance, both of their sons were grown and working in London. They had one son, Conor Jr., later described he and his brother had a happy and normal upbringing in the household. He also remembered his father had a tendency for practical jokes. Conor Sr. had previously worked as a hackney cab driver and plumber, and by 1991 was employed as a handyman and chauffeur for the German businessman and multi-millionaire Fritz Wolff. Wolff owned a property in Castle Lyons outside Fermoy as part of his employment. Conor often drove a vintage Rolls-Royce owned by Wolff, which many in Fermoy assumed Conor himself owned. Conor was regarded locally as a colorful character who had a great love of sleek, prestige cars. One resident later remembered, given Fermoy was primarily a working-class area at the time, the sort of cars Conor drove did not go unnoticed. So the person he worked for owned the fancy cars that he would drive through town, but apparently many in the town didn't know that. In 1969, Conor went before the local court in Fermoy on a charge of assaulting a youth following an incident where three young men were knocking on doors in the Chapel Hill area and running away before the resident answered. These incidents apparently continued for a number of weeks at the end of the previous year and upset a number of residents, including the Dwyers. After another occurrence of these, Conor intercepted one of those responsible and gave them a kick in the rear. After Conor voluntarily informed the Gardaí of the incident, the sympathetic judge later did not issue a punishment. In 1974, in one more instance, Conor was fined for dangerous driving during his work as a hackney cab driver. He did not turn up to court and was fined by the judge. So these are just court cases or police cases going way back to 1969 for the first one and 1974 for the second one. So they have nothing to do with his disappearance in 1991. But they had this information on Wikipedia. One profile written about the couple after their disappearance, which featured an interview with Conor's brother, indicated Conor had been previously hospitalized for depression and had suffered from it since. It has also been erroneously suggested Conor had previously disappeared in the 1980s for a number of years and returned to his family home with no explanation. However, aside from this one example, this detail never features in articles or appeals related to the case, nor is a previous disappearance of Conor listed anywhere on the public record. Notably, his brother had earlier stated prior to May 1991 Conor had never gone missing before. Otherwise, Conor was described by one neighbor as fond of life and a man who was never in bad form. So his brother says he never went and disappeared before, so I don't believe he ever did disappear before. So that information's not useful to what happened to him in 1991, in my opinion. Sheila worked as a homemaker. She was described as a lovely, polite woman. It doesn't say by who. It just says she was described as a lovely, polite woman and often noted for dressing elegant. Sheila also had a close relationship with her sisters, Maisie and Nellie, regularly phoning them in the weeks before May 1991. And in Sheila's picture, she does look like a very elegant, pretty woman. A colleague of Conor's who also worked on Wolff's property remembered him as a kind, gentle, and honest man, and the couple just nice people to be around. Their son Conor Jr. stated in an interview, "I didn't know anyone who disliked them, and I can't see them having any enemies. They were local, friendly, and respected people." Conor and Sheila were described by friends as a close but reserved couple who kept to themselves, and generally well liked in their community. They were also regarded as inseparable and kept up a weekly routine of shopping, attending church, and contacting family and friends. Conor Jr. later recalled he spoke by phone to his parents on the St. Patrick's Day before their disappearance, and they seemed fine. The couple were also in the process of selling a plot of land they owned elsewhere in the town and had just received an offer on it. Strangely, over a year before the couple's disappearance, William Fennessy, a 54-year-old former Fermoy town councillor, had also gone missing. Similarly to the Dwyers, Fennessy's car, a Daihatsu Charade, could also not be traced. Despite initial speculation, Fennessy's disappearance was determined to have no connection to the Dwyers. But it was striking a similar incident had happened in the vicinity of Fermoy during the time span of 14 months. Okay, it is my understanding from researching this case that William Fennessy's car has been found. I believe some remains were found with it, but I'm not sure. But his car was found in the water. Okay, it says the last known physical sighting of the couple was walking from their home towards the nearby St. Patrick's Church to attend a funeral on April 30th. They were greeted by a local girl who knew the couple. The following day, on May 1st, the last known contact was when Sheila briefly spoke by phone to her sister Maisie, with the former indicating nothing was wrong. So apparently, according to her sister Maisie, nothing seemed wrong or off with when she was talking on the phone with her sister Sheila that day. No one spoke to the couple for over 3 weeks, which raised the alarm for Sheila's sisters, Maisie and Nellie. The sisters initially called other relatives, friends of the couple, and even a colleague of Connor's to try and locate them. The couple had previously gone away for a week or two on holiday before, but had always returned and never without indicating their plans to someone. On May 22nd, at the request of family members, Garda gained entry to the couple's property on Chapel Hill. The house appeared undisturbed, with the beds neatly made, electrical appliances off, and some blinds down. The couple's passports were located, and glasses belonging to each of the couple were found on the living room couch. One item of note was a biscuit tin containing money. So they had over $1,000 in Irish pounds in a biscuit tin that they didn't take with them if they had planned to leave, in a secret location only known to families. Similarly, no major financial withdrawals were listed on their bank accounts. There was also much of the couple's clothing still present, indicating they had not planned a lengthy trip. The only object of note missing belonging to the couple was Connor's car, a white Toyota Cressida with a license plate number 5797ZT. Garda have since speculated locating the car is a key to solving the case. At the time of their disappearance, Conor and Sheila were respectively 62 and 61. Conor was described in reports as 5'8" in height and weighing 11 stone. He had dark hair and parted to the right, wore dark-rimmed glasses, was a pipe smoker. He was dressed in a checkered sports jacket with a navy lightweight trench coat. Sheila was described as 5'4". You see here it says 5'4". In another article they said 5'8". So, who knows which is correct when you're reading articles online or from Wikipedia. With fair blonde hair. She was last seen in a light woolen tailored jacket with white leather walking shoes. Given the proximity and prominence of the River Blackwater through Fermoy, Garda divers searched the river several times. There were also searches of the quays around Cobb and in West Cork. Ferry records in Ireland indicated no car matching the description or license plates of their car had left the country during this period. Similarly, an appeal if any parts being sold of a car matching its make and description drew no response. So they put out the word that this car was missing for people to let them know if any of their parts of that car came through their business or whatever, and they didn't get any response from anybody that they had seen any part of that car. There had been speculation the couple were involved in financial trouble or Conor had become involved in the illegal drug trade, but neither rumor was substantiated. Some friends of the couple allegedly suggested the possibility of a suicide pact, but no evidence of this has been found. In 1993, a reconstruction of the couple's last known movements and a public appeal by Garda was featured on the program Crime Line, broadcast on RTE1. This resulted in potential leads from the public for the investigation. There were numerous reported sightings of the couple across Ireland and occasionally overseas. If you hear thunder in the background, it's because it's storming here. A woman from Ballyvolane, and I know I'm not pronouncing that right, but Ballyvolane near Fermoy, believes she spotted the couple at an airport in Lourdes, France in June 1991 and later recognized them on the Crime Line appeal into their disappearance. Prior to this, she had been unaware of the Dwyers. However, the appearances and behavior of the couple she briefly interacted with had struck her at the time. In 1993, there was another possible sighting in Munich, Germany. However, Bavarian police and Interpol were unable to confirm it. The location initially intrigued Gardy because of Conor Dwyer's employment for Fritz Wolff. Wolff himself had been interviewed by Gardy but had been out of the country by the time of the couple's disappearance. Gardy generally believed any sightings of the couple since 1991 were well intentioned but mistaken. In 2000, acting on a tip, Gardy searched a quarry in Aherla, West Cork, but nothing related to the couple was found. No further explanation was provided on the background that led to the search. So they've searched various waterways, apparently looking for them over the years, but no sign of them or their car has come up. In 1997, the couple's home on Chapel Hill was sold in a public auction along with a separate site they owned elsewhere in Fermoy. This followed a court order obtained by the Bank of Ireland, with the proceedings of the sale shared between the bank and the Dwyer's relatives. In 2008, a radio program entitled Into Thin Air was broadcast by Documentary on One on RTE Radio 1. The program looked at the respective disappearances of both the Dwyers and Finnessy. Former neighbors and the Dwyer's son Conor were interviewed. At the time, Conor gave the view his parents could possibly still be alive. He also added, "I question myself sometimes. Why this? Why that? Why the other thing? How? Why? When? What? I don't know. And that's what keeps you awake at night. It rattles around in my brain all the time. There's a void of information. It's very bizarre and inexplicable. It's a living nightmare." In 2012, in Fermoy, a routine dive by a local sub-aqua search and rescue team in the Blackwater River found William Finnessy's car with his remains inside. So his remains were with his car when they found it. Over 2 decades since he was reported missing, the nature of the discovery, particularly in close proximity to where Finnessy was last seen, has led to speculation the Dwyer's car could similarly be found in the nearby river and perhaps missed on previous searches. In 2017, the obituary for Maisie Sweeney referred to her sister as the late Sheila, which indicated a widespread belief among the family the couple were deceased. In 2023, the lead detective noted that in relation to the case, Gardy still get calls and emails from the public, and we welcome that. He emphasized nothing in terms of theories has yet been ruled out, including the couple's car entering the River Blackwater. However, that is just one possibility. In 2024, similar to 1993, a reenactment of the Dwyer's last movements and public appeal by Gardy featured on the now titled Crime Call. The appeal also asked members of the public for information if the couple ever visited Cobb or Cobh or other areas regularly in their car. Gardy were also eager to talk to anyone who may have conversed with the couple around the time of their disappearance. The renewed appeal came as it was reported that Gardy were re-examining the case file and interviewing surviving witnesses along with the original investigation team. In 2025, it was reported that Gardy were pursuing new leads as a result of the appeal from the previous year. Several people had come forward with new information related to Conor's employment and interactions with the couple in the months before they disappeared. One line of inquiry being investigated was Conor's conversations with work colleagues in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. The mystery of the couple's disappearance continues to be featured regularly in news articles and true crime podcasts. Okay, so if I understand correctly, Mr. Dwyer worked as a handyman and chauffeur for a rich German businessman named Fritz Wolff. So that would account, I guess, for the timeline as far as like from the day that they were last heard from for like I think it was 3 weeks till they actually realized that they weren't there. So apparently maybe his employer was in another country and you know this was the days before cell phones and stuff, so he wasn't in constant contact with them, like by cell phone. So I guess that's why it took a few weeks for them to actually be reported missing, even though they were last heard from May the 1st of 1991 is when Sheila's sister last spoke to her on the phone. But it was actually 3 weeks later when her sisters came to the house, saw that nobody was there and their car was missing, and then ended up a couple days after that reporting them missing officially. So some questions I have. So I just assumed his boss or coworkers, he may not have I guess he didn't have any coworkers. He was just in charge of handling the vehicles and chauffeuring his boss around when he was in town, and maybe other people involved with his boss. So I'm not exactly sure how that worked out and why his employer or his employer's other employees or family members or acquaintances didn't notice that he wasn't coming and doing what he was supposed to do as far as taking care of the vehicles and stuff. But it could just be that he worked on his own. He didn't have coworkers as such. And Mr. Wolf, his employer, didn't realize that he wasn't showing up and doing the stuff that he was supposed to do with his vehicles and so forth. And also, another interesting aspect, if he was driving around in fancy, prestigious cars that weren't technically his, did somebody think he was a person of money, of wealth, of great wealth? And, somebody thought maybe he was a rich person and maybe he could have been targeted for that reason, or somebody knew that he worked for a millionaire and he could have been targeted for that reason. That's just a couple of questions I have. And then also the thing about saying that he were his coworkers, I believe it was, or his brother said that he suffered from depression and that somebody thought it might be possible that he harmed himself. So that's interesting, but it doesn't matter at this time whether he or they purposely went off to harm themselves or whether they had an accident, because the result would be the same in that case. Let's say they purposely drove into water or they accidentally drove into water, and that's where they are in some body of water there that just hasn't been located yet. The end result is that they passed away around the same time that they went missing, or probably, I don't know, I don't have the date of exactly when they left their house in the car. If it wasn't the same day, May 1st, it could have been any time in between those 3 weeks, I suppose. But since I would assume it's between May 1st, when Sheila's sister last talked to her, and the time that Mr. Dwyer had to show up to work and handle his affairs in regards to the stuff that he took care of for his employer. In other words, I don't think they just hanged around the house and he didn't go to work and then they took off during that time. I believe that they went off before he had to go back to work, and they went somewhere maybe just for a short drive or to go somewhere, and they ended up going into the water. Now, if they purposely did it, they could have went any time during those 3 weeks. He could have purposely not went to work if he or they were planning on doing harm to themselves. But it's more likely that they probably had an accident, I would say, just because if they were actually planning something so horrific as to like purposely harm themselves, purposely kill themselves, wouldn't they have handled, being, they seem like responsible people, wouldn't they have handled some of their affairs before they left? And, not in some way they could have said goodbye to their sons, not like tell them, hey, what we're going to do, but we're going to, you know, we're going off for a while. We won't be seeing you for a while. I don't know. It just seems like they would have said something like to kind of say goodbye, but not actually say goodbye. They would have handled their affairs or something. They would have, I don't know. But I don't think, maybe it's because I don't want to think that they went off to harm themselves, but that does happen where couples, more than one individual at a time, could harm themselves on purpose. Like where I live in the state of Georgia, we had two young teenagers who just graduated from high school. I believe they were both 18 years old, two brothers, twin brothers, I think they were, who went to a state park in Georgia and committed suicide. So stuff like this does happen, but it seems to me like if they ended up in a body of water, it more likely an accident than suicide, in my opinion. Just from everything I've read about this case, I would say that it was, if they ended up, if their vehicle and them ended up in a body of water, it was more likely an accident of some sort. Like maybe, I assume Mr. Dwyer was driving. Maybe he had drank too much alcohol, was a little inebriated, and ran off into the water. Maybe bad weather. It was raining and they slid off into the water. So that would be my best guess, that over a suicide, it would be an accident. And then the other thing we have to consider is, could they have been victims of foul play? Could they have been targeted on purpose for whatever reason, or just some random criminal met up with them, hijacked their car and them, killed them, and then took their car somewhere to get away? Maybe used it as a getaway car to get somewhere. He didn't have a vehicle, and then he hid the car or destroyed the car and put it in water. Unless their bodies are found with their vehicle, even if they are found, the evidence may be destroyed by this time. But if their vehicle was found and let's say they were, sitting in the front seat and there was no evidence, their remains, whatever's left, their bones or whatever's, if they have any bones left that didn't float away from the vehicle, don't show any signs of like stab wounds or gunshots or something, say, well, they just died by going in the water, by drowning, either accidentally or on purpose. But if their bones were found in the trunk of the car, then you would know something else was up. Or if one of them was found in the driver's seat and the other was found in the trunk, you could say, well, it's something like a murder suicide. But even today, let's say their vehicle and their bodies are in the river. It has been so long that the car would be like in pieces if it's still there, if it hasn't floated away in pieces and rusted out. There'll only be certain pieces left, and then their bodies could have floated away and out of the vehicle too. So it may not be like all like one piece car and then their bodies inside. So you say, oh, we found them and this is what happened. The evidence of what happened to them could be destroyed also, even if they can prove that they found their vehicle in the water. So even finding their vehicle may not answer questions that people have. And it could be that their vehicle is found, but their bodies aren't found with it. So that would not help people close this case as far as actually what happened to them. Now, unless somebody did something to them, and either the person who did something to them or the people who they told what they did to them comes forward and speaks and explains it, no matter what happens in this case, the police will never know exactly what happened to this couple. So it will be an unsolved mystery forever. Even if they find their vehicle and find their bodies, you'll never know if it was accident or on purpose. But at least that will give the family closure. They said, well, we know that they ended up in water. That's what happened to them. They weren't kidnapped or murdered and their bodies buried somewhere by some unknown criminal or random serial killer. like that. This is a picture of a white Toyota Cressida that they went missing with, but I don't know what year that their car was. This is like a 1985, but apparently their car looked something similar to this. This is a white Toyota Cressida. So their car probably looked something like this. So this is a Google Earth view of Ireland, and this is the town where they live, Fermoy. And apparently the Gardaí have been asking people about if they have any information if the couple like to travel to this area here. I'm assuming maybe because they think that their vehicle could have went into a waterway here. And so that's why they're asking about that, unless they have some information that they possibly knew somebody in this area and that they would went to visit them or something. This is a police website, and they have a thing about this case. It says it was posted April 24th, 2024. So it gives information on this case. So I'm going to read the investigation part to see what it says. It says, when Garda attended at the couple's home, they found both their passports along with around $1,000 in cash, a substantial sum of money for the time. It was noted that some clothes were missing, but not much. Nothing was disturbed in the house or appeared out of the ordinary. Conor's car, a white Toyota Cressida, registered number 5797ZT, is still outstanding since the couple's disappearance. While all ports were notified at the time, there were never any reports of the car having left the country. The car was registered to Conor and had recently been taxed in January 1991 and has never been re-registered in any other name. And then it goes on to give their descriptions again. It says they were in good health. Or Sheila was described as a housewife and is described as a quiet person who was in good health. As a couple, they are described as having kept to themselves. Both were well known in the town of Fermoy and were always well dressed. Conor worked as a caretaker in Castle Lyons house, which was owned by a German businessman at the time. There was an array of high-valued cars in the property, which he was often seen driving throughout Fermoy. He was well known in Fermoy and the surrounding areas and had previously worked as a taxi driver. And it gives his description. He was 5'8", 62 years old. She was 60, 5'4". This remains an open and active investigation, and there has been numerous reviews throughout the years. Lines of inquiries have been followed up in numerous different areas, with the entire case being fully reviewed at this time. These inquiries have led Garda abroad as well as Ireland. The River Blackwater has been searched on numerous occasions by the Garda Water Unit. So, if they are in water, unless their vehicle is completely destroyed and, in such pieces, which could make it harder to find, but they could still find pieces of it and they could find bones. But depending on how deep the water is and what water they are in or were in and then floated, I guess they could have floated out to the ocean, right? At least their bodies, if not the vehicle, after all these years. I doubt they would find the vehicle and their bodies intact in the vehicle if they did just go in the water while driving accidentally. And then I doubt after all this time everything would be intact. But here in America, they have all these different YouTube channels that do these water searches, and they've been very successful at solving really old cases and finding people. They may not always can say exactly what happened or how they went in the water, but I assume most of the time it's accidents or like drunk drivers who go into the water or have an accident in bad weather, or it's night, they fall asleep and they go into water. They don't see well and they just go into water and they end up drowning to death. I don't know if they have these any of these diving companies. I call them YouTube divers. They go around and search waterways for cars and bodies and such. And they do it, I guess, with their own money or money that they make off of the internet or through donations, whatever. They're not funded by the government because apparently it takes too much money and time and resources for different police localities here in the United States to search all these waterways. And so that's why sometimes cases go unsolved for years and years and years and years because they don't have the resources to look in the water, even in the areas where they think they might have gone off. They'll do searches, but they don't, you know, do continuous searches over the years that a case is unresolved. So with these internet people, the YouTube divers coming in, and they'll do it, they make money off of YouTube and through donations and such, and they go around trying to resolve these cases, these old cases, or even new cases. And the technology today is a lot different than it is or than it was back then in the 1990s. So if there are any companies like that in Ireland or in Europe or in America that want to go to Ireland to look in specific areas where the police think that they could be, that might help solve this case. They just need I think all the waterways in America and Ireland need to be searched very well because, well, if they have lots of missing people cases where they went missing with their vehicles, because it seems like that's what happens to a lot of people. They go off into a lake, a pond, or sometimes even not water. They go off into like a ravine. They go over a cliff, and their vehicles aren't found until years and sometimes decades and decades later. So I'm thinking if this was just an accident and they drove into water, which seems the most likely scenario, just, they just need to really concentrate on looking at the water. And maybe that's why they want to know, like, did the couple visit the Cobb or Cobb area, the COBH area? Because maybe they think they went from their home in Fermoy and drove down to Cobb, which is somewhere down here, and went into water there. Unless they think they knew somebody there and something happened to them more sinister, I assume they think that they possibly went to water on their trip down. Maybe they went off the road somewhere. Something happened. Their vehicle ended up in water. But here in America, we've had so many cases where you would think it would have been resolved like a day or two after the people were reported missing, but it took decades and decades for them to find their vehicle in even small amounts of water, like a small little pond area. One example of a case where a couple went missing, weren't found till like 44 years later is the case of Charles and Catherine Romer. This is them right here in this picture on the left here, and this is their vehicle that was found. And their car and their bones were found in this pond that was right near the hotel that they had been staying at and that the police knew that they had been staying at. And it was a small pond. It wasn't some big, huge lake or ocean or body of water or running river. It was just a small pond near this hotel, literally near the parking area of the hotel. Somebody could have easily backed up into it or went into it by accident, or it could have been bad weather, somebody could have been inebriated or something like that, or just maybe one of the driver, maybe Mr. Romer had dementia or something. You never know because they were older people. But it took them 44 years just to find this car that was right in the pond, right next to the hotel that they were staying at. And so, of course, the technology back then was not the same as it is today. But this has been a mystery, ongoing mystery here in the States for over 40 years. But finally, somebody, a group, one of these diving groups, took the initiative to look in this pond with technology that they have today, and they found it. And so now this mystery has been solved. At least, you know, their bodies have been found and the vehicle has been found. It doesn't necessarily tell the family and the police exactly what happened to them, but you can pretty well guess, as I think the police did, that it was an accident, that they mistakenly drove into the pond or backed into the pond. And they've been sitting there all these years, and all these years speculation has gone on that, they were crime victims, that they were brutally murdered, carjacked or whatever, because apparently they, were people of means. They had money and they had lots of jewelry on them, or the wife did. But no, they were just set in the pond for 44 years. So it could very well be that that's something similar happened to Conor and Sheila Dwyer in 1991, that they just went into water and their vehicle has not been found yet. But maybe if some of these diving groups took the initiative to use the latest technology that they have and started looking in the waterways where they think they might have gone, what their travel path might have been, and started looking at these waterways, they might find Conor and Sheila Dwyer. And if there happens to be any other missing people in Ireland that have gone missing with their vehicles, they could possibly find other vehicles. I understand that, the police may not have the time and resources to just constantly do stuff like that, but these diving companies, that's what they do all the time. That's their goal, is to find people and stuff in the water. So maybe if they have something like that, these groups in Ireland, or they could get them from other countries to come over there and just really, really search the waterways near Conor and Sheila Dwyer's residence, or wherever they think that they might have gone. But yeah, that's the case of the roamers. They're from New York State, I believe, and they traveled down to Georgia. I believe they were going to Florida. But anyway, this is the car once it was found, and their bones were found inside. So they confirmed that it was them, and this is their vehicle, what was left of it. But you can see the condition, but it was still pretty intact, as far as, it wasn't broken up into tiny pieces. And there it is again. So it is possible that the Dwyers are in water and they have not been found after all this time, because it does happen. And this is just one example. There's been many cases where people missing for years and years and decades have been found just recently. And I guess it's thanks to the new technology, thanks to luck, just thanks to the perseverance of these diving teams that go in and do this. So, but I mean, it's been a mystery. I mean, there are lots of YouTube videos about this case, and what a great mystery it was. And a lot of people thought they were, crime victims, and had all kinds of these awful scenarios, but really it turned out to be very simple. They were right near the hotel where they were staying at, where they were last seen. So there's another picture. But they have confirmed that it was their vehicle and it was them. So that's one case that was resolved just the end of last year, after 44 years of being in the water. Here's an example of a couple that went missing, and they had actually ended up being murdered. This is the Wikipedia page for their case, but it was a man named Lau and his wife Marie, last name McCann, Lau and Marie McCann. They were last seen on July 3rd, 2010, while on a road trip from their hometown of St. Albert, Alberta, to Chilliwack in the Canadian province of British Columbia. A few days later, their charred motorhome was discovered, resulting in a search that led to the arrest of Travis Vader. Vader was eventually charged with second-degree murder in the deaths of the McCanns, though their bodies have not been discovered. Vader was found guilty on September 15, 2016. His conviction was reversed, but then he was convicted again, so he is in prison to this day, as far as I know. But what happened to them was they left St. Albert for Chilliwack, British Columbia for a vacation, and to pick up their daughter on July 10th. at the airport. That same day, they were seen at a Superstore gas station fueling their 1999 Gulfstream coach motorhome in St. Albert with their green Hyundai Tucson in tow. They are then believed to have traveled to the Yellowhead Highway. In the evening of July 5th, firefighters responded to a motorhome on fire at the Minnow Lake campground near, oh, the pop-ups keep coming, Edson, Alberta. No bodies were found, but police discovered the motorhome belonged to the McCanns, though the Hyundai Tucson was missing. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police visited the McCanns' home but received no answer. And so what happened, they investigated and they eventually ended up arresting who they thought murdered them, and he was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison with the chance of parole. I think that's just normal for Canada, though. So this case happened in Canada, but the the point, this is just an example. I'm not saying this is what happened to the Dwyers at all. I'm just saying this is an example of another scenario that could have happened. They could have went for a little trip or drive somewhere, and they could have ran into a random criminal and something happened to them, and their bodies have never been found. Like the McCann's bodies have never been found. The Dwyers have never, their bodies have never been found if they were possibly murdered. There's a lot of places in Canada to put bodies, and I'm sure there's a lot of places in Ireland to put bodies also where they would never be found unless the police had a good idea of where to search. So let's see. So they officially declared them dead, and he was put away. I'm trying to see if there's any more information on what his motive was. Is he just, I guess, to steal their vehicle? Could that have been what happened to the Dwyers? Could somebody have wanted to just steal their vehicle? Or somebody thought that they had money since they saw Mr. Dwyer driving around in all these expensive vehicles because he worked for a millionaire? Could somebody had thought maybe they had money, and so they followed them when they left their home, or they just a random criminal met up with them somewhere somehow along their route wherever they were going on their trip? Or could somebody have actually been at their home and driven away with them and their vehicle, or like more than one involved in their two vehicles? Somebody drove their vehicle and then another person was in another vehicle. Even though they say there's no evidence of that anything happened bad at their home, could it have just been somebody got them in their driveway while they was getting in their car to leave or something? Because somebody who wanted to steal their vehicle took them away, possibly murdered them, and then took their car wherever they needed to go. Just random crime. You can never rule out random criminals doing random crimes. I imagine the chances of that happening to them is pretty low, happening to the Dwyers pretty low, and that the most likely scenario is that they had an accident of some sort and ended up in water somewhere. But you never know because crime can happen anywhere. I don't know what was going on in the area they lived in 1991, but it's possible they could have met up with somebody and something happened to them more sinister than them just having an accident. This is the Crime World YouTube channel, and they did a video or podcast about this case. And reading most of the comments regarding the case, it seems like most people think that they ended up in water. One comment says, I've always believed they ended up in the river, and I'd love to see one of those sonar experts do an intensive survey at all the potential entry points for cars. Another comment says, if the couple were missing for 2 weeks before the alarm was raised, it seems odd that Conor's workplace didn't make an effort to contact him. I thought about that too, but then I thought, well, he worked for an individual businessman. Maybe he didn't have a lot of coworkers or contact with his boss. I don't know how often his boss checked in with him. Apparently his boss was out of the country. His boss was in Germany, I believe, at the time that he went missing. This comment says, they probably just went for a drive, swerved to avoid a deer or some animal, and crashed, be it into a body of water or a bog, or drove off a cliff or something equally mundane but horribly unfortunate, and the remains have yet to be discovered. Doesn't always have to be a mystery theater production. Either way, it's still a tragedy for the couple May they rest in peace and rise in glory, and their poor family. So, yeah, that seems like a logical comment to me. Could just be something like that, and they just haven't found the vehicle yet, and they may never find the vehicle especially if it's in a body of water and the vehicle has disintegrated or washed away, moved downriver over the years. The pieces, I mean, pieces of the vehicle could have been found possibly by somebody, but they didn't know what they were seeing. Like if it washed up on an embankment or to shore, just a small piece of the car, people may not have known what it was after all these years. This comment says people who have gone missing in the USA are now being found by some guys who do scuba diving. If there's a river or lake nearby, it should be thoroughly searched. Yes, that's what I was talking about earlier. In America, we have all these scuba diving companies or charity groups or different things like that, these YouTube content creators who do this stuff. So if Ireland doesn't have these kind of groups over there, maybe they could get some groups to possibly come over there. Of course, it takes money, but these groups are fund themselves, meaning that they take donations, whatever. They don't get government money. The reason a lot of the police in America and other places don't do all these extensive searches is because unless they have a good idea, or they think they know where a vehicle or a body is, they can't just go searching anywhere and everywhere due to lack of resources and money and time. The only place a car can be hidden for so many years is underwater. Connor's colleague and friend noticed a change in Connor before they went missing. He seemed depressed, so maybe he or both of them decided to end their lives. Or maybe Connor didn't want to leave his wife behind. At the time they went missing, the quays were unprotected and there were no cameras. It was only in recent years barriers were put up on quays after a number of cars went into the water. They often drove to Cove for a trip, so it may not have been the River Blackwater. They didn't take their passports or money. The ports were checked. They didn't leave the country. So he's of the opinion that they're in water, and that's what a lot of people are saying in the comments. Let me just randomly pick some more to see if we can get a different viewpoint. I believe the car is submerged in water. My real gut feeling, given the circumstances surrounding their disappearance, is that it was a suicide pact or fatal accident, and they've left in the car and driven it into deep water, and it's never been found. The Blackwater is a very substantial river. It could easily conceal a submerged car forever. The simplest explanation for missing people in mysterious circumstances is generally the right one. That doesn't mean this doesn't deserve further investigation. And then somebody commented back, I still would not rule out that German millionaire businessman that Conor Dwyer worked for. So I assume the police back then when they went missing talked to the German businessman, hopefully extensively, and decided through their investigation that there was no evidence that he had anything to do with their disappearance. Like he didn't have a motive or a reason to want to harm Mr. Dwyer. Let's see, this comment says, similar to the case of Barry Coughlin in Crosshaven in that he and his car vanished without trace. Unfortunately, his car with his remains inside was discovered very recently in the water just yards from where he was last seen. I don't know why he wasn't found within the first few days, to be honest. It should have been the first place that was searched. It seems as though the case of the Dwyers could potentially be the same situation. Yes, it's always possible, like the case of the Roamers in the United States, in my state of Georgia, that their vehicle was found in just a little pond right next to the hotel that they were staying at. And the police knew that they were staying at that hotel. And apparently they did search the pond, but obviously they didn't search it good enough, or maybe they didn't have the right resources or technology to search it. Or maybe they really didn't think because they were people of money, and maybe they thought that they were kidnapped or carjacked or murdered by criminals. They didn't, really think they was in the pond, so they didn't search it as good as they should have or something. I'm not sure what happened back then. It was a long time ago, so those police are long retired or deceased, so can't ask them questions. There are cases where individuals go missing suddenly with their vehicles and many years later are found in the bottom of a lake having driven there by accident. It is not a stretch to think it could have happened to a couple and that they may never be found in spite of all the searches. That's true. In a radio documentary on the disappearance some years ago, a guard who worked on the case said that when he entered their house, it was very tidy as if they were expecting visitors. I also read somewhere that Conor had disappeared before, but returned and that the couple had changed religions. I got the impression, if these details were correct, that this was a double suicide, probably drove off a pier. And then people commented back, interesting, do you know which religion they converted to? I'm assuming they were originally Catholics. He responded, I read that they became Quakers, Religious Society of Friends. In those times, I would be shocked if a couple in their 60s didn't have a tidy house. They were just tidy people, but let me tell you, not everybody was. There could have been all sorts going on behind the scenes, and with the husband also reported going missing years before, it adds more intrigue to the story. The sons and wife would have known about those stories. He could have been in jail, left his wife, or working away. Okay, if he was in jail, there would have been a record of it. And as far as the reports of him going missing for a significant period of time, I can't confirm that because the Wikipedia didn't think that that story was accurate or true. So I have no way of knowing. But, if there are other confirmed reports out there, I don't know about them that he at one time went missing before. But even if he did, that doesn't mean that in 1991, him and his wife didn't just have an accident or something else happened to them that had nothing to do with his previous disappearance, if he did disappear. Probably a case of them having intentionally or unintentionally ending up in a lake or river and haven't been found yet, even though I know they searched the nearby rivers, as she said. Still a very fascinating and sad case. So as you can see, most people think that they're in water, and a few think maybe foul play, and some think they intentionally harmed themselves, and some think it's just an accident. But let's say that they ended up in water by accident or suicide. It doesn't matter now how or why, because we'll never know. The police will never be able to determine if they went in on purpose or accident. They just have, all they can do is find the bodies to give closure to the family members and their descendants. But so either it's just going to be their bodies are found and they had an accident or suicide, or their bodies may not be found if they were destroyed in such a way that because somebody did something to them. If they were murdered, somebody could have hidden their bodies or destroyed their bodies in such a way where their bodies won't ever be found. So the two best scenarios I can come up with is that they had an accident, because I don't believe the suicide thing, even though he might have been depressed, unless he was going through serious depression or he had been diagnosed with a terminal disease. Like right here in this picture, it looks like he has a Band-Aid on his head. I don't know when this picture was taken in relation to when they disappeared. They disappeared in 1991. I don't know what year this picture was taken. But did he possibly have some medical issues he was dealing with that made him even more depressed, and he felt the need to end his life? But they didn't want their family to know or to think that they committed suicide, so they just left one day and took their own lives. I don't think that's likely. And even their son, Conor Jr., said in an interview years ago that he thought like it was foul play or something like that. So, I mean, the family would probably know more than anybody just guessing on the internet, obviously, but maybe the family just so baffled by it that they have no idea. So he was just saying, they worry that they possibly could have been crime victims. Like this Band-Aid here on his head, I wonder if did he ever have like skin cancer removed or something, or he just bumped his head or had a scratch or something, or what he had going on. Because when I see Band-Aids on the face like that, sometimes I think of skin cancer lesions that have been removed and stuff like that, and maybe he had cancer that spread to other parts of his body or something. That's the only scenario I could see where he might want to harm himself and his wife, or they do some suicide pact. I don't really think that's what happened, but obviously, I don't know. Um, so my best theory on this case is that it's just an accident and they're in water somewhere. The next case is a random criminal, and the criminal hid and destroyed their bodies very well and their vehicle very well. But the criminal's motive might have just been a random crime. He robbed them. Criminals rob people for $5, so it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, it may be unusual for the area where they lived, but it's possible. Or maybe somebody wanted to steal their vehicle. They just needed it to get somewhere, and so they took the vehicle and ended up killing them and left their bodies somewhere. So really, that's the best theories I can come up with. Like, I can't think of any new scenario that people haven't already thought of. Even trying to think outside the box and just go crazy with trying to come up with some crazy theory, because it's been so long. Like, why not just see if you can come up with something that maybe somebody hasn't thought of before? But there isn't nothing. It's either an accident, suicide, or foul play, and their bodies are in water and their vehicle was taken apart and destroyed somehow. Their bodies could be buried somewhere in their car. There was a case, and I'm not saying this is what happened to them at all, but there's a case in Wyoming in the USA, I believe in the 1980s, where a girl and her car went missing. And years later, the case was solved, and it was found that the man had killed her and buried her, but he also buried her car in his backyard or on his property. I don't know how many acres he owned, but apparently he lived in a rural area. And so I don't know where he put her body, but he murdered her and he ended up burying her little red sports car. I guess he knew that sports car would get him caught. So instead, just hiding it in a barn or getting rid of it, burning it somewhere, he actually buried it in his yard. And so they found it years later. So that case was solved. But his motive was he was a pervert, like a sexual predator. And she was a young girl driving alone in her little red sports car. So, crazy things can happen. Did that happen to these people? I don't think so. Like, I don't think they were killed and then their car buried somewhere. I think the most likely scenario is that they accidentally ended up in water. And really, that's the best case scenario, because, you don't want it to be that they were gruesomely murdered, and you don't want it to be that they wanted to harm themselves. But also, I'm sure they did. Hopefully they did. The police hopefully looked at the family in 1991 to make sure that their family didn't have a motive to want them deceased. And I don't think that at all, one, because there's no evidence of it, but also because what would they get out of it? Because don't you have to have a dead body before you can start, collecting on inheritance or whatever? And their kids did eventually get their inheritance, but that's when they were declared dead years later. Like, if you wanted an inheritance, and so you wanted to kill your parents for inheritance, wouldn't you want their bodies to be found immediately, or to have their bodies, make it look like an accident or a natural cause of death? So, the usual reasons for murder are revenge, love, or, oh, I forgot the third one. What's the reason? The third one. Let's see, revenge, lust or love, or money. Duh, I can't believe I forgot money. Yeah, money or greed, love or lust, or just revenge. But there's always that random criminal who kills just for the heck of it or for some other dumb reason. So, but my best guess and my best theory regarding this case is that they're just in water and they ended up there accidentally. So maybe one day some diver will get lucky and find their vehicle or their bodies, and they will know at least basically what happened to them. But if they don't find their vehicle or their bodies, or somebody doesn't come forward and says, I know what happened to them, and tell the police what happened to them, then this case will never be unsolved. And they will just be one of those never solved cases that remains a mystery on the internet forever.